Good morning and welcome to this episode 71 of the Anno Domini podcast. This week we have been meditating upon digging deeper into our founding document, as I used to say, the birthright certificate of the United States of America. And of course, everything starts with the Mayflower Compact from November 11th, 1620. Then we have the Declaration of Independence from the 4th of July, 1776. Now we have the Constitution that was ratified on September 17th, 1787, September 17th, 1787. And then later on, 1789, the Bill of Rights, 1791, all of the Bill of Rights just consolidated. So those are our founding documents. And before I forget to say that, and I would not do that, but before I even have the potential of forgetting that, I am inviting all of you to the Constitution Day on September 17th at the Noel Heritage Plaza in Odessa at 7 p.m. We're going to be reading, again, this is the 6th year in a row that we're going to be doing this, the public reading of our Constitution. This year is going to be very, very special. Why? Because we will have representatives from over a dozen countries there, each one coming from a different continent and different country, nation of the planet, And they're going to be reading portions of our founding document. I believe that this is going to be an amazing moment. Of course, we're going to have American citizens there, pastors and local elected officials like the mayor of Odessa and Ector County, Judge Dustin Fawcett, Javier Hoven. We're going to also be there. Dr. Bartlett's going to be there. So people that we know, people that we do not know, ordinary citizens just united on this moment, on this very, very special moment of reading publicly what we are all about. And this is what we've been doing this whole week, diving into the Constitution, understanding what it is all about, understanding the connections between the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. And I have been, guys, I want to say something in all seriousness now. And I think I mentioned this before, not this week, but a couple of weeks ago. All of the attentions of the world and especially the American media, our talking heads, the big guys on our side are, of course, focusing for a very obvious reason, focusing on the electoral process that is going on right now, presidential election on November the 5th. There's a mess going on. Nobody knows what is actually coming. We perceive, there's a perception that something very bad is coming on our way between now and November. Yesterday, the Biden administration just, how can I say that? They decided by I think it was an executive order. They decided that January the 6th, 2025 is going to be a special national security event. So my question is, what is it that they know that we don't? So because everybody's attention is there, somehow, unless it is something that I need to talk about, that I feel that I need to talk about, my purpose and my plan, my decision is to focus my attention somewhere else and to somehow prepare people for what is coming. It doesn't matter to me if at this point of the game, it does not matter to me at all who is going to be the president elected on November the 5th or the 6th, or a week or 10 days later, and who is going to be sworn in and inaugurated on January 20th, 2025. It does not matter to me. And of course, there's a lot at stake. I understand the differences between the two candidates. Don't get me wrong. But what I'm saying is I decided to focus my attention on building people up in the local level. And wherever this video gets to, whoever is under the sound of my voice right now, my purpose is to build you up so that in the local level, we can transform it into our last line of defense. Whatever happens in Washington, D.C., whatever happens on November the 5th and between November the 5th and January 20th, I really wanted you to focus and to understand that in the local level is actually your last line of defense. And this is why I have been focusing my attention on educating, on instructing, on motivating, on inspiring people to engage in the fights that we have in the local level. And one of the biggest fights, I believe, is education. So this is my focus here. I hope that this video can reach more people in the local level. And God willing, someday it will. The videos will reach more people. But as long as I can inspire people and encourage them to engage in the local environment and be a part of the change in the local level, somehow I believe that we can be not invulnerable, but we can somehow protect each other, protect the city, protect our local communities by engaging and by inviting other people to engage in everything that goes on in the local level based on our ancient paths. As I always quote Jeremiah chapter 6, verse 16, when Jeremiah was telling the people of Israel, go back to the ancient paths. This is my voice to you. This is the trumpet that I have been sounding for a long time now. Even before I moved to America, go back to the ancient paths and you will find rest to your soul. So without further ado, let me just continue here on our subject this week, which is to analyze and meditate upon our Constitution. Today, we're going to be talking about something that is very, very special to me. I love reading, I love studying about the Federalist Papers. And let me just define what the Federalist Papers are. And I am going to read this introductory words here. They will speak much louder and much more powerfully than my own words. So the Federalist Papers were a series of 85 essays written and published to defend the ratification of the U.S. Constitution. The Constitution had many opponents, and I mentioned this before here, that there were the anti-Federalist guys. So the Constitution, they believed, was pretty much centralizing power, giving a lot of power, much more power to the central government as they wished to see. So the Constitution had many opponents known as the anti-Federalists. This faction believed that this new form of government proposed by the Constitution would give the federal government too much power. Some of the anti-Federalists argued the powers given were even greater than even Great Britain had over the colonies. Such concentrated power concerned individuals that their freedoms could be in jeopardy. In addition, states' rights would be severely diminished, and without assurances for individual freedoms through a Bill of Rights, large states such as New York and Virginia back then refused to ratify the Constitution. Immediately after the proposal of the Constitution, opponents began to attack the document via essays in newspapers. Same thing, same outlet that the Federalists used to write the 85 Theses. Three influential supporters of the Constitutions, they are known as the Federalist guys, known as Federalists. John Jay from New York, he wrote 5 Federalist Papers. Alexander Hamilton from New York, he wrote 51 papers. And James Madison from Virginia, he wrote 29 pages or papers, responded by writing the essays over the course of several months, explaining in great detail why it was the best form of government for the new nation. And here are the 3 guys: James Madison on your right, Alexander Hamilton on your, let me rephrase that. James Madison on your left, portrait of Alexander Hamilton on your right, and at the center, John Jay. John Jay was the first Supreme Court Chief Justice. So he wrote only 5 because he was very ill, he was sick, and he died right into the process or throughout the process of writing the papers. And their pseudonym was Publius. They were writing that, and then John Jay, after writing 5, he died out of this disease that he had. So what I'm going to do today is to bring to your attention the 5 most important Federalist Papers. All of them are very important because each one of them brings light to, and emphasizes specific points of policy in the Constitution. Remember that the Declaration of Independence was composed of grievances, pretty much. This is what the king is doing wrong. Points 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 25, 26, 27, 28. The Constitution was pretty much the response to that, each one of the provisions. And the Federalist Papers are going to explain why those provisions should be confirmed, should be ratified. And they write extensively, they write prolifically on how and about how and why, especially why, the reasons behind the understanding that the Constitution should be ratified the way it was. Of course, before that happened, they had also to promise, they meaning the Federalists, they had to promise the anti-Federalists that they would have a Bill of Rights. A Bill of Rights that would somehow strip a little bit of power from the federal government and bring the powers back to the states and back to the individuals. So remember that I mentioned that before. There was only one state, Rhode Island, that decided not to ratify the Constitution the way it was. So 12 out of the 13 colonies did, or now states did ratify the Constitution the way it was written. And then 3 to 4 years later, there was the formalization or the ratification of the 10 initial Bill of Rights. So let me address here 5 of the most important Federalist Papers, not only according to my understanding, but according to the understanding of scholars and Supreme Court justices. And one of them that I always bring to the table is Antonin Scalia, my hero. And I read all of his books, and I tried to keep up with everything that he said before in lectures, in interviews, in articles that he wrote. So let us dive into the 5 most important Federalist Papers. Number 1 in importance, according to scholars and the way I see it, according to myself, Federalist Paper number 10. It was one of the most famous Federalist Papers. James Madison argues as to why the Constitution was uniquely capable of preventing the United States domination by factions and special interest groups. Madison reasoned that it is part of the human nature to separate into factions. There inevitably will be different opinions concerning government, religion, liberty, etc., that arise, and citizens will form factions. Madison's concern was the majority factions that could, according to his own words, quote, sacrifice its ruling passion or interest, both the public good and the rights of other citizens, end quote. Madison greatly feared what he called the tyranny of the majority. The anti-federalists, looking at the massive amounts of land that were to be conquered, that there was right in front of the colonizers and the now members of the 13 states. They believed, and they actually brought one of the points of Montesquieu, the French philosopher, back to the conversation. They said, because Montesquieu had said that, a republic only works in a small portion of land. A republic does not work in a big, massive, large amounts of land, because when you have that, the population is going to spread so much, and you will have, because of the differing or distinct ways and mindsets, ways that people look at life, ways that they are raised, ways they are educated. There is a multifaceted variety of factions, of groups that will antagonize each other, groups that will fight each other for power. So that was one of the motives, one of the reasons the anti-federalists did not want to have a centralized government under a republic. They wanted to have 13 individual republics. What Madison says is the problem of factions is not actually a problem. It is a solution. Why? His mindset is, in a multitude of factions, each faction will keep the other one restrained so that one faction cannot overtake the other. His focus was in one faction that would be somehow wooed together by many different ones aiming at controlling everything. So this is what he calls the tyranny of the majority. And this is exactly why our founding fathers rejected, like vehemently rejected, the idea of direct democracy to the new nation. So what the anti-federalists saw as a problem, the federalists saw as a solution. The more factions we have, the more the factions will check and balance each other. And this is very positive, he says. So that is the soul and the heart of Federalist Paper number 10. The second very important Federalist paper is the 39, and this is what it says. James Madison penned a defense of the Republican form of government, describing what qualified as a republic, then pronouncing the Constitution as a federal, not a national form of government. What is the difference? A federal form of government is ruled by the sovereignty of states. Remember, when the states give the federal government some powers, restricted powers, rather than a national government, which is a centralized sovereignty. This is exactly what we have in our country, my country, Brazil, and pretty much 99% of the countries of the world. James Madison defined what makes a government republican, noting two main points. Number one, a government which derives all its powers directly or indirectly from the great body of the people in the states. So he is talking here about directly and indirectly. Directly is the direct vote. This is why we have the representatives. The House of Representatives in Washington, D.C., they represent the people, the population. This is why each state has proportionate to its population, the number of representatives in Washington, D.C. But indirectly, it meant the senators. The senators were defined two by state, regardless of population, because the senators used to, until 1916, when the 1913, when the 16th Amendment was passed, that was changed. The senators not anymore represent the states. By the way, I don't know if you knew that, but the senators before 1913 were elected by the state legislatures. They were elected by the Congress of each one of the states, not by direct democracy, not by direct vote as they are right now. They have been now ever since 1913. So this is the 16th Amendment, and it is like it was a catastrophic change and a dramatic negative highlight right there in one of the amendments to the Constitution. But let's keep going with the 2 points that James Madison brought to the table. So he defined what made a government republican, and he noted 2 points. Number one, the government that derives its powers, all the powers, directly or indirectly from a great body of people in the states. And the second point that he made was that administered by persons holding their offices during pleasure for a limited period or during good behavior. He's talking about the restrictions that should be applied to people that would apply for office, that would put their names on the ballot. These people should be there for a restricted amount of time, And when we see people in Washington, D.C. now for 40 years, we see how far we are from our own Constitution for a limited period and out of good behavior. If you misbehave, you cannot be there. And if you're there and you misbehave there, you should be impeached. You should be kicked out. So that is the heart of Federalist 39, which is the focus on the laser focus attention of James Madison on the understanding that America is to be a federalist republic, which meant that the federal government would receive some, and I'm highlighting this and stressing it out and yelling to the top of my lungs, a few powers from the states, not irrestricted power, not unlimited power, as right now is going on. Thank God we still have the 10th Amendment in place, and places like Texas, like Florida, like Missouri and others, they have been able to somehow protect themselves, because right now the federal government has been under control for a long time. It was not only, this administration or the past administration. This is not shocking. When we look at the $30+ trillion debt that we have right now. Why is that? Or what's the reason for that? The reason is that we gave too much power to the federal government, and of course they will drain up our money. This is how they create tyrannies, right? So that was Federalist 39. And of course, guys, I recommend all of you to just go back to each one of these Federalist papers. I pull them up on your Google and read them all and understand what they were talking about. But of course, I would recommend you to read all 85 essays. So I'm bringing to your attention here just the ones that are considered to be the most important ones. The third most important one was Federalist 51. And here it is. James Madison wrote this essay and dove into the system of checks and balances within the new government: legislative, executive, and judicial, the three branches of government, right? A single person rules the executive, the president, this is in the Constitution, who is elected via the Electoral College. The legislative branch consists of two bodies, the Senate and the House, and we have already talked about how they are elected, how they get there. State legislatures elect members of the Senate, and each state receives 2 senators, regardless the state size. The House of Representatives members were to be elected via direct democracy, and states were assigned members proportional to its size or their size. The president nominates members of the judicial branch. Though the nominations needed confirmation by the Senate, judiciary members received life terms so that the president who appointed them had less influence over their actions, of course, because they are there into different terms of different presidents, as well as the senators that confirmed them. So the senators are out so many times, even before the justices are out of the Supreme Court, for example, out of death or for any other problem. Madison describes how the system of checks and balances would preserve liberty in the United States by giving express powers to the different branches. It served to act as a check on the other branches' power. This is what he says. If one branch were to become too powerful, American liberties could be in jeopardy. A balance of power between the three branches of government would help to preserve the liberties and the freedoms achieved by the American Revolution. So you see here the checks and balances, how one branch checks and balances the other one, but internally, how those movements work, how the president gets there, how the senators and the representatives get there, how the justices get there, and then how they create a balance and equilibrium into the whole equation. Federalist paper is amazing. And one of the reasons that Madison uses to talk about, one of the foundational grounds he uses to talk about the necessity of checks and balances is this quote. He said, in Federalist 51, he puts this text there. This is a direct quote from him. If men were angels, no government would be necessary. If angels were to govern men, Neither external nor internal controls on government should be necessary or would be necessary. In framing a government which is to be administered by men over men, the great difficulty lies in this, he says. You must first enable the government to control the governed, and in the next place, oblige the government to control itself. So this quote, if men were angels, it addresses us back, sends us back directly to a scripture in the Word of God. Jeremiah chapter 17, verse 9. The heart of man is desperately corrupt. And what Madison is saying is we cannot trust human hearts. But I want to bring your attention to something that I always talk about. Remember that they were putting themselves in this position of being the first government of this newly or recently birthed country. So what they are practically doing is they are cutting powers that they could have assigned to themselves. Guys, where is it that you saw this trend to happen, this monumental action to happen in world history? Every single time that a group of men have had in the past and will have in the future the power to assign themselves into a position of government, they will give themselves all power plus extra powers, right? This had never happened before. A group of men that goes into government, they are going to become the government, and they say, don't trust us. We're going to mess up. Just give us limited powers, restricted powers. States, we are asking you to give us centralized government, just a short list of powers. We don't want everything, because we cannot have everything. Because if you do give us that, what is going to happen is that we're going to become tyrannical, because we know our own hearts. So this is a moment of clarity, and this is unheard of in history. I would say American history. This is unheard of in human history on the planet. And this is one of the reasons that I believe that this country was so blessed. And I could speak hours only on Federalist Paper 51, but let's keep moving on right now. Federalist 68 is another one, a very important paper. This is by Hamilton. Alexander Hamilton provided a defense for the method of electing the President of the United States, and he talks about the Electoral College. Since the electors, the ones that are represented or given the power to represent the states and the people, and they go to Washington, D.C., they go to the Capitol on January the 6th, after every single one of the presidential elections, they get together to confirm or to reject the electoral votes, right? So since the electors could not hold political office, they would be outside politics in a what Hamilton calls detached situation. And they would aid in the avoidance of corruption in the election process. So, of course, this is how it was engendered. This is how this thing was born. We know that there's a lot of corruption, rampant corruption right now, left and right, up and down. But this is how it was initially thought of. Based on Madison's notes, the Electoral College sprung as a compromise to provide leverage for the less populous southern states, which counts a lot now to the less populous states all across the nation, like Wisconsin, like Montana, like Hawaii, like all the smaller countries, right? They don't only have 2 senators representing, regardless of population, representing the people. But the Electoral College, of course, it's based on proportionate to the number of population. But the smaller states, smaller populated states, they have their voices also in the whole process. So this was Federalist Paper number 68. And once again, please read it in its entirety. It's amazing. And the 78 is the last one that I wanted to bring to your attention today, also written by Alexander Hamilton. He explained the role of the judiciary branch in the new Constitution. Hamilton described the judiciary branch as the weakest of the three branches. You see how right now, not only the left, but including some portions of what we would call right, want the judiciary, the judges, to have more power than they did in the past, than the Constitution gives them. So this is what we call judicial activism. And Antonin Scalia was so adamantly against this thing. He was like a warrior against this idea of packing the Supreme Court, against the idea of giving the judges power to create laws, to legislate. I mean, Roe v. Wade was created out of thin air because the justices back then decided that it was taking Congress too long to create something, to come up with something, right? And they decided to legislate from the bench. And this is a discussion that we see every single time there is a confirmation of a judge in the federal level or a Supreme Court justice in Washington, D.C., in the Senate's Judiciary Committee. That conversation always comes back to light, right? Always comes back to the table. There's a part of the people, a part of the senators that want a judge to be very active and even in some cases, in some occasions, just overrule laws. And the others that are like Ted Cruz and others, and Josh Hawley, I'm talking about the ones today that are saying, no, we cannot do that. We should not go there, right? John Kennedy from Louisiana, also a great senator. So those were the five main or major or most important what's the name of that? Federalist Papers. I totally blanked. So Federalist Papers. And once again, please go back to that book. I have 2 or 3 Federalist Paper books here, and you can just borrow from me if you want to, but on Amazon you find them very, very cheap. So let me show you a video here just summarizing everything that I just said, and then I'm going to come back to wrap this thing up. Let us see it.
Did you know that when the U.S. Constitution was first drafted in 1787, lots of Americans thought it was a bad idea? Having thrown off British rule during the War of Independence, many believed that the 13 colonies should be completely free to govern themselves, rather than answer to a central federalist government, as proposed in the Constitution. It's why 3 of the document's most important framers, Founding Fathers Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay, got together to write the Federalist Papers, a series of 85 articles and essays designed to persuade Americans that a strong central government, working in tandem with individual state governments, was the best way forward for the United States. In 1787 and 88, the Federalist Papers were published in various New York-based newspapers under the collective pseudonym Publius. One of the most famous and influential is number 10, in which James Madison argued that representative democracy would protect American citizens and states against corruption. Unconvinced, many anti-federalists published articles of their own, and by the end of 1787, just 3 states had voted in favor of the Constitution. But by the following June, with the support of 9 states, the Constitution was officially ratified, and the writers of the Federalist Papers were vindicated. The Federalist Papers are still influential today. Although they aren't legal documents, they provide a window into the minds of the Founding Fathers at a critical juncture in U.S. history, and have been quoted in U.S. Supreme Court decisions over 300 times since they were written. What forms of media are used to sway public opinion and influence lawmakers today?
There you go. Just a brief summary of that. And again, I enjoy reading the Federalist Papers, been doing this for a long time in my life. But I really recommend all Americans to do that because, again, the Federalist Papers, it's a long document, of course. It's a long one. But there is no better way of understanding the Constitution than that. And there is a growing number of people in America today, I mean, scholars and ordinary folks that have been thinking about, what were the anti-federalists right? I mean, weren't they correct in their assumptions that that thing would just go down and go south very quickly? Well, they were proved wrong, or they are proven wrong, because the Constitution is being in place for over 200, precisely through 237 years. And every single time that the Constitution was paid attention to, it worked. The country worked, right? So without thinking about the Federalist paper, or let me rephrase that, if we leave the Federalist papers outside of the equation, it is very hard to understand the Constitution. That is my point. And this is why I decided to bring this topic for our discussion today here in this episode 71 of our Anno Domini podcast. And on Monday, I am going to start a new series on the 28. It's called, that I called here at the Nehemiah School of Government, the 28 principles that made America the most powerful and the freest country in human history. And my plan is to start on Monday and go all the way through November the 5th. Again, instead of focusing my attention in a place where everybody is paying attention to, which is the presidential election, I want also to bring your attention to this type of, in order to educate people, in order to, once again, to use the same verbs that I used before, to educate, to inspire, to motivate, to encourage people to engage in the local level, not only by voting on November the 5th, not only by engaging in the presidential election, but especially in the local elections. We have local elections here in Midland. We have local elections in Odessa. We have local elections in Andrews, in many cities, and pretty much all the cities of Texas, of the United States of America right now. So let us engage. And again, this is not an invitation only or a right only. This is a duty. This is a duty for which many people lost their lives. Many people lost their sacred honors, their fortunes, right? So let us engage and do our part today, at least to leave to our grandchildren, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, a legacy of freedom and liberty as we received from our founding fathers. I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and I hope to see you all here on Monday for this new series that we're starting next Monday. It's going to be the 16th of September. May God bless you, and I hope to see you there. Bye.